What up, YouTube? Episode 118, 118 in the house. We have Sam joining with us tonight. I don't know if she'll talk, but she is working on some artwork. My wife's here.
Hello.
Complaining about the culture of Made for More. So we're going to put her on the spot and we'll ask her all the questions. On the culture code, we're going to be looking at chapter 2, 3, 4. That's still in the first section. So if you haven't listened to episode 117, go check it out. We're going to be getting ready to hit record. So thanks for joining us on YouTube. If you know of anyone that has not subscribed, tell them to check it out. So get ready. Are you ready? Are you ready? Sam, you gotta be quiet, okay? Dang. We are, what is 64 minus 48?
Mm-hmm.
17? 16?
17. 14 minus 8.
It's
7?
6. 8 plus 7 is 15.
16.
We are 16. Wait, how did I say 14? What was the answer?
16.
We're 16 downloads away from the biggest month. It's pretty cool. All right, ready? Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Everyone, welcome back to the Made for More Consulting Podcast. We are a podcast where we are discussing, I'm gonna have to, oh my gosh, this is so stupid. Hang on. I don't know why I did that. 3, 2. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Made for More Consulting Podcast. Mario here, and we are on episode 118. We're a podcast where we're talking about leadership and personal development. We challenge ourselves to grow personally so that we can help those around us to continue to grow. Because we always ask the question, how can we pour into others' lives if we have nothing to pour out? So we continue to pour in our own lives so that we can lead from there. I got Jamie with me, my wife. Welcome, babe.
Thank you, babe.
And then if you're on YouTube, you can see Sam. Sam is with us. She is doing some artwork, trying to be as quiet as she can. So we have Etiana out and Jamie's here. And we are just going to continue to go through the book, The Culture Code. It's by Daniel Coyle. I think this book is becoming one of my favorites. It's a really good book. If you're a leader, a manager, a boss, an owner, or someone who just wants to learn more about building great culture, this book is definitely for you, and we're only through chapter 4, right?
Yes, sir.
Keep in mind, when you do listen to our podcast, if you're new, we don't read the entire book on the podcast. We read it personally, and then we take notes, and then we highlight everything that we would like to discuss. So this week we're going to be going over chapter 2, 3, and 4. And again, I'm super excited because he has some really good stuff that I'd like to share and that I definitely connected with, specifically in chapter 4. So we're going to get started. Better recap real quick from last week. We are on section 1 of this book, and it's called Build Safety. So all this section about, from chapters 1 to 6, is all about building safety on your team, making sure people feel safe. And it's not talking about physical safety. Yes, you may need physical safety if you're like an electrician, construction, anywhere, right? But safety is more internal from a team to feel like they do belong, like they're known. And that's what builds safety. That's what starts a good culture, because it builds trust.
Yes, sir.
Are you good?
Yes, sir.
Why do you keep saying sir? Son of a biscuit. My wife said that the culture here is bad, so she keeps calling me sir. Yeah, so here we go. You ready?
Ready.
All right, chapter 2. It's called The $1 billion Day When Nothing Happened. So in chapter 2, he is going to start discussing a couple of companies that before they had blown up and people knew about them, they were competing against each other. And one happened to be Google. Google, before it even became Google, was going up against another company about ads. They were starting to build ads online. And so one of them would become Google, but the culture inside the company that was yet to become Google was just creating ads, and they were not winning. They were creating ads that were decent, but they were not searched upon, they weren't clicked on, and so the CEO, the owner of that company, left a post-it note. Do you remember what he posted? He posted a post-it note in their kitchen, in their, like, I guess where they all come and lounge, and it said, "These ads suck." And he just posted it there and left. And I believe it was right before the weekend because everybody had to pass through there, and they saw the post-it note, and it just said, "These ads suck." So a tech guy at one point walked in there, saw the post-it note, and said, "Okay." Didn't go talk to anybody about it. He just went home, took care of his business, put his kids to bed, said goodnight to his wife, and then he went back to work. And he began the hard work of changing the ads. And he was not in the ad business, but he was a tech guy for the company. He started changing the ads, and all of a sudden we had Google. This one guy decided to take that note and run with it. And one of the things that Daniel Coyle continues to talk about in here is the culture that they had, even though he said these ads suck, which some people may take offense to it. But if you aren't inside the culture and you don't know the way they connect, have safety, and communicate, then you are on the outside looking in going, I would not want my boss to talk to me that way. However, when you do step inside that culture, you realize that they had safety, they had communication, they had trust, and yeah, that's why it worked. And that's why they weren't, this tech guy was not worried about stepping over someone else's role. He wasn't worried about if he was getting in trouble for working on it. He just knew that his goal was to make this company better. So he took advantage of it and he ran with it. So yeah, what do you think about that?
I do think it's interesting. I think that'd be hard if I was working on a project and found something like that. And I do think it's cool to see that it wasn't taken negatively, that this guy stepped outside of his role to do something different. And obviously it worked in the benefit of the company, but I think a lot of times we talk about not getting in somebody else's lane, but he saw it as an opportunity to better the company.
Yeah, and they obviously had trust with one another, so that's why he took it and ran with it. One of the things I want us to ask ourselves is, have you ever been a part of an organization where maybe that didn't work? Maybe there wasn't buy-in and there wasn't trust, so if someone left a note of, hey, these ads suck, then somebody's going to get upset, they're going to quit, they're going to run the other direction. But one of the things it says about this is why did it work, and why didn't they take offense? And it says this in this quote. It says they did not manage their status or worry about who was in charge. Their small building produced high level of proximity and face-to-face interaction. And I put in other words, trust. So the reason that he didn't take offense is because he worked with these people shoulder to shoulder. They do describe it, the owner or the manager or the boss, whatever he was, they do describe him as, hey, he was someone who didn't mind you challenging him and he challenged you, and they trusted one another. But that word proximity, they were, again, a small company at that point. They were all within the same building. I want to say it was maybe 15 employees, I can't remember. But the one thing I love about this quote is he says that they weren't worried about who was in charge. They produced a high level of proximity and face-to-face interaction. So I would think that if you are in a culture or organization where maybe you're never in front of the owner or boss or manager, depending on the amount of employees that are in this company, maybe you don't feel trust for that person. Maybe you feel trust for your immediate supervisor. But if you don't even feel if you don't feel trust for your immediate supervisor, then there's not going to be any kind of trust up the chain, whether it's the owner, the manager, the leader, whatever it is. So at some point you got to get face to face. You have to have more interaction, and the only way that happens is by spending time with people and working together. You agree?
Absolutely.
So the two words that come to mind in this chapter for us as we're listening, as we're going through this, one is connection, a real connection, not fake connection. Because if there was a fake connection in that environment, then it wouldn't have worked. I think this person would have gotten upset. They would have taken the post-it note, trashed it, and said, "Hey, this is ridiculous." But they knew and they trusted their owner enough to go, "Oh, he just posted something." So it's a challenge for all of us to step up, and that's real connection. It's not, again, fake. And the other part is they care. They care about one another. I believe that if it wasn't care or connection that they had, then Google would have never made it to Google. And since that time that guy changed everything, they've owned the search engine world online. So both of these words will build safety. So one of the things I want to ask ourselves is, the cultures that we work in, are they more in tune with results than care? Are they more in tune with product than care? We got to remember that care will bring us the results that we want, but you can't manufacture care. You cannot try to produce care. You're the only person that can go, "Hey, I have to be real about this. I got to spend time with my people." And even if you're so busy, at some point you have to find some time to just be real and care for your people. And you're going to see that in chapter 3 and 4, I believe, for sure chapter 4, but doesn't matter how busy you are, you can't manufacture care and try to sell it. You got to do it your own. You got to make it real. So that was chapter 2, the $1 billion day that when nothing happened. So, yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think about when I stepped into this job that I'm in right now, that was immediate. Like, my boss was immediate in wanting to get to know me and build a relationship to start. I mean, I even came into the busiest season, and that was priority, was getting to know me, check-ins on a regular basis of how I was doing, how my family was doing, and that makes you want to thrive in an environment. Like, you want to give more because you know your value, because somebody cares.
Yeah.
And that continues to be the case. So, and I'm about to even step into possibly a different position, and I'm like, oh, I hope they operate the same way, because it matters, and it means a lot when somebody cares.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think, remember again this quote: "They did not manage their status or worry about who was in charge. Their small building produced a high level of proximity and face-to-face interaction." I think that's something that we can all take away. Remember, it's not about status. It's not about who's in charge. It's about making sure you care for one another, and then the stuff is going to get done. So that was chapter 2. Chapter 3, I like this one. I have a shirt, which is interesting because Jocko talks about this. So I have a shirt that I wore during Christmas that someone had messaged me on Facebook about, but it's just interesting how this works. So chapter 3 is called "The Christmas Truce, the 1 Hour Experiment, and the Missile Ears." I didn't know that missile ears was a word, MISSILEERS, missile ears. So it's going to talk about 3 different events that took place, and how culture was different in each one and how it impacted. So this chapter continues to help us see safety within a group setting and stories that completely are different. And so we're gonna hit the Christmas truce of 1914. I don't know if you know this, but I mean, I do. I follow it with what Jocko had. I have a shirt about this again, like I said, and I don't know if you're not a history buff, maybe you still have heard about it. But it's when the German army and the Britain army were at war, and if you don't, just go Google it, but also read up on it. Right? Don't just Google one thing, but read up on it. Several accounts of what took place. So these two forces were at war, and at times they were just 7 meters apart in these trenches that were filled with mud, fleas, rats, and it was where this trench warfare took place, where you could literally throw a grenade from one to the other. This new they had tanks, they had all kinds of new things coming out, and fighting was intense. They hated each other. The hatred was so bad that, again, different countries writing different things about the other. And here they are in 1914, and Coyle paints a good picture for us for the hatred between the two armies and the people groups. And this war was at its worst, again, because of how close they were to each other, proximity-wise, in the trenches. And I believe that if you, there's a scene in Saving Private Ryan when they're throwing grenades back and forth, the same grenade back and forth, because that's how close they are. But then something happens, and I want to read that on page 29. And it says this. Then on Christmas Eve, something happened. It's difficult to determine precisely where it began, but it appeared to have been spontaneous, occurring independently at several places along the front. It started with songs. Some were Christmas carols, some were military songs, and in most places the singing went back and forth for a while, with each side applauding and jeering the other's renditions. Then something even stranger happened. The soldiers began to climb out of their trenches and approach each other in a friendly way. Outside a town called La Chapelle, English soldiers heard a German voice call out in English, "I'm a lieutenant. Gentlemen, my life is in your hands, for I am out of the trench and walking toward you. Will one of your officers meet me halfway?" Rifleman Percy Jones figured it was a surprise attack, as he later wrote. And again, he begins to write things about what happened. But the guy gets out and he starts walking towards the other side. And then all of a sudden, one guy gets out of the other trench and starts walking towards him. And then it says the truce was far bigger than they had been reported, involving tens of thousands of men along 2/3 of the British held line. The interactions include, check this out, eating, drinking, cookies, cooking, singing, playing soccer matches, exchanging photos, bantering, and burying the dead. In the annals of history, there are a few cases where all-out violence pivoted so swiftly and completely to a familiar warmth. The deeper question is how it happened. So what's interesting is all of a sudden Christmas is coming along, and it started weeks before. I'm not going to get into all that, but it started weeks before with these small little routines. One side would get up and they said they could hear the other side get up. They were probably brushing their teeth. They were probably going out and getting water. They were getting supplies from a certain place, and the other side would not fire on them because they had to do the same thing. So then they started saying, the soldiers on both sides realized that they both had to do the same thing. They both had similar routines, similar callings, similar agendas, but they were just on two sides of the war, and they started respecting that. So then all of a sudden, Christmas is getting close, and one side starts singing Christmas carols, the other starts to finish it, and then all of a sudden, they're walking towards each other. They start to celebrate together, they start singing together, they start eating together, and it's two sides that completely hated each other, but over a small period of time of getting to know each other, they begin to see that the routines were similar, their callings were similar, their agendas were similar, and then they took that to trust, and they had a truce. So we're told that it started with small steps over and over again, but they were close, they had conversation, and they learned about one another. So one of the things that I thought about for us is if these two people, these two countries, they hated each other, if they can do this, then how can we do this for our teams? How do we draw closer together with people on our team? I think that one of the hardest things for me to see is if someone is going through something on your team and everyone knows about it, but no one does something about it, then I would think that that's a tough culture to be in, because it seems like it would be every man or every woman for themselves. And like we say, a beautiful picture for me is the Spartans of 300. They hold their shield up for their brother on the right and on the left, and so when everybody holds their shields up, no one can get to their back. So if you're the only one holding your shield up and there's no one next to you, then your back's exposed and somebody's gonna get you in the back. So if you're in a culture right now, how do we build this kind of trust where all out war stops and you draw people together? Any ideas?
Oh, my initial thought was what the picture started off telling in that story of one man stepping out, and then another man stepping out, and I think it's that personal. Like if it really is a culture of craziness, whatever words I'm lacking.
There's chaos, war. I mean, there's dead bodies. They're helping bury each other.
Yeah, I think it starts with one person recognizing how important it is to get to know somebody, because it's like once you get to know somebody, all those other things just kind of go to the side, because then they make sense, or the story you're telling yourself about the situation or about the person changes because you can see it so much more clearly because you know the person now.
Yeah, and what you're saying is what in this chapter he says they had physical closeness. They were so close that they got to know the other side, but then it also says a shared burst of beliefs and identity because they both were wanting to kill each other. They had that in common. They were both soldiers, they had that in common. They had families, they had that in common. They were losing friends, they had that in common. Then all of a sudden they call a truce because they were celebrating Christmas. And I think that's crazy that it would stop right then and there. And it says, here's what's interesting at the very end of this section. It says, we are the same, we are safe. I'll go halfway if you will. And so they did. And I think that if you're a boss, a manager, an owner, if you can say, I'll go halfway if you will, then that's I mean, if you could just close the book right there, I think that's it. Culture. If you're the boss or the owner and you're not going halfway and you expect people to walk towards you, man, that bridge is a long walk for them and they're not going to go that far. So if you go halfway, they will. And I think physical closeness has a lot to do with that. And for me, I mean, I go back to, I think people that have heard this over and over again, this podcast, I'm big on food, just hanging out, playing games, video games. I don't like board games, but for me, food's a big thing. What about you?
I know.
Yeah.
Well,
but I mean, if you're part of a culture, how have people not reined you in, but built that trust? How have maybe people in your life walked halfway to you? Any idea? I'm just curious if there were places that you've worked. How have your bosses or your mentors walked halfway to you?
Well, one of the things that resonated with what you said was that there were things in common. I think we all have something in common with each other. It may not be, we might not both want to go eat to celebrate, but everybody probably has a parent, or a lot of us have children, or something in your life that would connect you to somebody else. I'm like you, I'm a foodie, so anytime a friend wants to spend time with me, they're usually asking me to go eat or to go get coffee.
Yeah.
So
that's good too. Yeah, coffee, a drink, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, you can learn a lot about me just by sitting down with me and having coffee.
I wonder what it was like back in the day when there wasn't homes. They lived in caves, and I wonder, like we've said before, the cave people, or even I don't even know the soldiers, the 300 soldiers, or the gladiators that would finish doing what they were doing, and they'd come back home. If they'd go home or if they'd sit around a fire, like, I mean, we see the pictures, I don't know how real it is, but all the men sitting around a fire discussing what was going to happen next. And they didn't care about rank because of all the time they spent together.
Yeah.
So,
well, the women probably did that at home.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just constantly doing life with each other. So, I mean, I think the status changes because you just recognize the importance of doing life with other people.
Heck yeah. So the other part of this section, or this chapter, had 3 sections. The next one was the 1-hour experiment. It was one of the best call centers in the world. So on the other side of the world, they had an amazing culture. It got better and better, and they were but then they began to see that some employees were leaving and they were going for better wages somewhere else. So this call center, of all things, had the best culture, but they were saying, why are people leaving? What can we do to make them better? So they made an experiment, a 1-hour experiment, and what they did was they took new hires and for 1 hour, they taught them about the company, taught them about the culture, and they told them what the company could do for them. And then they took another set of new hires, and for that 1 hour, they asked, how can what you do, or how can who you are and what you believe add value to our company? Tell us about you. Tell us what would make you belong. And then all of a sudden, so later on down the road, almost every single one of those new hires that was in the second group that we learned more about them, not the company, they all stayed because they got buy-in. And it says this, it's something that feeling of belonging, what kind of questions can we ask to make someone belong? So if you're doing a new hire, or if you're trying to hire for your business or company or small business, or you're just trying to add people to your team, it can't necessarily be about the product. It can't be about the talent. It needs to be about the person you're trying to talk to. Like, hey, what is it that makes you special? What is it that you wish people would know about that no one knows? What kind of talents do you have that maybe you wish you could use on a day-to-day basis, but you haven't used since high school or middle school? What kind of creativity did you have back in the day? So what you're doing is you're getting to know them rather than telling them about the company. I believe that if you have buy-in by showing them what they can add to the team, they're going to stay a lot longer than you telling them about a company where they go, okay, this is just like everybody else. So I thought a couple of questions I put is, what kind of talents do you have that make you feel like you can contribute to a team with confidence? Not just this team, but any team. If you were to go anywhere, what kind of confidence could you have with the talents? And another question is, what do you like to do to celebrate when we win? And what are the most things that you maybe face when you have failure? Like, what are some of the things that you fear? And again, getting to know that person will allow you to speak into their life better as you get to know them and as you work closer with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it was just a 1 hour thing. So 1 hour, I keep thinking if I have somebody for 40 hours and I just use 1 hour to get to know them, which you should be able to do more, but if you have so many employees, I totally get it. But if you can do that, if the owners can do that with the next level of management, that management level with the next level, and then the next level, everybody's getting an hour of someone else's time to get to know them, you're just going to make a ripple effect of culture in a good way.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody that's higher up than me, similar position as me, but higher up. And I told her, it was interesting because it was the first one-on-one conversation I'd had with her. And after that conversation, I was like, we need to do something outside of work. Like, because yes, having those one-on-one conversations with somebody in an office environment can still be beneficial, but there's something to getting outside of that and just spending time with people you work with and getting to know them outside of work. I think there's a value to that as well.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Goes, right? Because I mean, you have to feel safe in order to invite them over or invite them anywhere. You have to feel safe with them. And if you feel safe, it's what we said before. If you have safety, you have trust. If you have trust, you have teamwork. If you have teamwork, I think you have success. But if you don't have safety, then you're never going to have trust.
Yeah.
If you have every person looking out for their own back, then again, I think you're in trouble.
And I do think, I mean, you made the comment about the leader stepping out, doing the halfway. And I think that's so much more important than the person below giving the halfway. Like, the leader has to start, because I think they're just with the status, it's hard as the person underneath to feel like, oh, well, I want to make this call first, but when the leader does it, it's an invitation that just starts the relationship of trust.
And it builds confidence in your employees.
Yeah. Yeah, because they see you. That tells you they see you. They care about you enough to take that step.
Yep, that's good. The last section of this chapter is called the misleaders, and this was interesting because it's a group of people with the most important job in the world, is what I think. It starts back in the day, over time in our culture, people that looked over the nuclear bombs all over the U.S. These guys were, again, one of the most important jobs. There was safety within the team. People were afraid to mess up, but they learned from their mistake. Their future was never in jeopardy. They all had a connection. But as the United States grew and these jobs got more and more boring, they didn't focus on safety. They didn't train enough. Their future, if they made a mistake, was in jeopardy, and they were more scared to make a mistake because they thought they'd get fired or kicked out of that role, and then there was no connection. So what's happened over the years is the lack of safety, future, and connection has allowed that job to be so It's very important. It's one of the most important jobs, if not the most important, because you get a call to use a nuclear bomb at any second, but they haven't. So what those soldiers have done is just slacked. Some of them have fallen asleep. The issues that, or the reprimands that were written down in this book that were collected is insane as to how they just continue to increase because soldiers are bored. But back in the day, they were bored as well, but there was a connection. They felt safe together. They did things together. They trained. And now there's none of that, I don't think. And that's what's making this team feel uneasy about being in there. And again, the most important job in the world, and people are being fired or let go of because they cannot stand watch and do their job. But when you look at it, what we're saying in this book is it goes back to the culture. If you build connection, you build safety, and then you build a future, and your people are supportive in that, then no matter what the job is, they're going to stand and do it. So what was interesting is when this job started way back in the day, it was more in tune with what they had to do than it is now. Now it's tough to find somebody to do the job. And what's interesting is it's in the Army, or in our servicemen and women, but they have to look at the culture differently in order to build it new with the new kind of culture that needs to be built so that it can match what they're hopefully wanting and the expectations. But this part of the chapter was one that I wouldn't say failed, but this is the one that he shared with us that said, hey, this isn't a good culture. Because again, the most important job in the world, and if you can't build safety around a team, there's no connection, they don't think they have a future there, then they don't really care what the job is. They're going to leave, or they're going to slack, or they're going to fall asleep, or they're going to play video games. They were on their phone at one point. And we know that nuclear weapons are very, very dangerous, and you can't just leave them in the hands of anybody. So it sounds like they don't have a culture there, and the leads need to take responsibility for that. But the two words that I want us to remember in this chapter, so we talked about the missileers, we talked about the 1 hour experiment, and the truce of 1914. The two words that keep coming to mind are connection and identity. You can throw proximity in there. I think the biggest thing was the leader going halfway. I'm sure we'll put that quote out this week. We'll tag Daniel Coyle in it. I know he's he's looked at a few of our posts, but it's always cool to see when an author checks out what we're doing. But the two words are connection and identity. In the first chapter, it was connection and care. So all this goes back to building culture. Culture has care, has identity, has safety. It builds confidence, and it's real, not fake. So connection and identity. So the last chapter is probably my favorite chapter of this book so far. By far my favorite chapter we've read in a while, because we read a couple of different books lately that, again, they were challenging, but this chapter is probably my favorite chapter. It's about it's called How to Build Belonging. So if you're a part of an organization, a team, or if you're an owner or business guy, woman, or maybe you just have a team of volunteers, man, this chapter's for you. And it's called How to Build Belonging. I mean, this chapter alone is worth, to me, buying the book or listening to it. It's How to Build Belonging, and it's all about Greg Popovich. He's the coach of the Spurs. I'm a big Pop fan, but not, again, I don't really care for basketball, but this book tells us he has the highest probability of winning above any other franchise in any other sport. They did a study that said he's the man when it comes to it. The Spurs consistently perform the 1,000 little unselfish behaviors that say, take the extra pass, be the alert defense. There's tireless hustle. It puts their team above they don't put any of their own interests above their team. It's all about the team, and it's never about the individual. So they're saying that Greg Popovich is one of the greatest coaches to ever coach. And if you follow basketball, you know that he is very respected. And the way he selects players it's not just on talent, it's about their character and if they're coachable, because he believes you can build character, but if you're not coachable, then he's not going to want you. So what makes his team win? It's said that it's not just talent or character, but he builds his culture. He's a big guy that likes to wine and dine. He loves wine. He loves going out to eat. And it's said that before he drafted Tim Duncan, one of the greatest basketball players to ever play, he spent 3 days with him before he drafted him to get to know him, fishing on a boat, kayaking, whatever they did, but they did not talk about basketball. It was all about getting to know him as a young man. And if you know Tim Duncan, he stayed with Greg Popovich for all his career, won a couple of championships, but Popovich is all about building culture. I said again, it's not about the individual, it's about the team. And one of my favorite parts of this book, again, is it says, let me just read this part. It says, I'm sure that was the thought about beforehand, says RC, the Spurs general manager who has worked with Popovich for 20 years. He wanted to make sure Benelli was okay. So Benelli had just lost the game for him. He missed a shot, and they were way ahead, and they missed a shot and they lost. And Benelli was the one that really had done a horrible job in the game. And so Greg Popovich went up to him, talked to him, and he wanted to make sure Benelli was okay. That's the way Pop approaches every relationship. Check this out. It says he fills their cups. So I love that he uses that, because he says it's an intimacy contest. He wants to be close to him. He walks up. He wants to be right next to you. He wants to be in your face, because he says it's like a catching up on life with kids. It's about teammates. It's about love you, brother. Popovich, it just says it's every part of his culture. A lot of coaches can yell or be nice, but what Pop does is different, says assistant coach Chip. He delivers two things over and over. He'll tell you the truth with no bullshit, excuse the language, and then he'll love you to death. Sorry, that was in the book. So, anyways, what's interesting is he wants them to connect to a culture that's bigger than basketball. So there was one day that they lost and they came back to practice, and he turned on the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King Jr. and they were like, why are we watching this? And he wanted to tell them there's bigger things in life than basketball. And really quickly they connected to going, oh man, it's not about this or that. He had always tried to connect things that were outside of the culture in the world going on to the culture in the basketball arena, so that they could see that we're just playing a game tonight. It's not the world. Basketball's not the world. So he always connected them that way. There's a quote on page 54 that I'll read. And it says, again, he loved to take them out all the time. They had, at the end of their season, he would give them a book made of all the menus that they went and ate at. So when they got done, they'd get a notebook with every single menu in every place that they went.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, his thing is wine and dine. So it says, food and wine aren't just food and wine, Buford says. They're his vehicle to make and sustain a connection. And Pop is really intentional about making that connection happen. He'd do anything to make that connection. And I love this. He says, one misconception about highly successful cultures is that they are happy, lighthearted places. This is mostly not the case. Here's what they are. They are energized and engaged. So that means if you want to have a culture that is moving forward, everybody has to be energized and engaged. And what it does is it starts with the leader. The leader has to care more about the people and about the culture than the result. Because if you know Greg Popovich, you know that he won championships, but the way he won championships was about caring for his team. It says he filled their cups. And one of the things this chapter does that I love, it says, if we're going to talk about belonging cues, he talks about Popovich creating these belonging cues, meaning these are cues to helping people belong. Number one, you're a part of this group. He wants them to know you're a part of this group. Number two, this group is special and we have high standards here. And number three is I believe you can reach those standards. So some of the most important basketball moments Popovich has made that the team remembers were more important than basketball. And I love the fact that it just said that he filled their cups. I mean, that alone tells us that as leaders, if we are so in tune with just ourselves, then how do we pour in other people's lives? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. they had just lost something, and it says in a moment that could have been filled with frustration, anger, it says he filled their cups. They talk about the game. Some of them cried. They began to come out of their private silences to get past the loss and to connect. They even laughed. I remember watching him do that, and I couldn't believe it. R.C. Buford says, by the end of the night, things felt almost normal. We were a team again. It's the single greatest thing I've ever seen in sports, bar none. And they just lost against the Oklahoma City Thunder, and they needed to win, and they didn't. And he went ahead of the team, went to the fine restaurant, set up their tables. He set the table for them, which is crazy. He set out everything. He got the wine, and when they got there, everybody that got off the bus was given a handshake, a hug, whatever it was, and then it says he filled their cups. Isn't that crazy? It connects on a different level. And that's what I think coaching does. That's what culture should create, is to go, man, I know we have to do this, but you're still an individual and you're still a human being. And number one, you're part of this group. This group is special. We have high standards here, but I believe you can reach those standards. So
it's funny, it makes me think of parenting.
Oh yeah, that was what one of my questions was going to be, is if we can think of this through parenting, you got to meet them halfway.
Well, and the picture of the guy made a mistake. I mean, and it was a costly mistake that didn't just affect him; it affected those around him. And the coach's reaction was, "How are you?" You know, and I think me as a parent, I can get very focused on my child's performance or behavior, for lack of better words. But think about the environment that you create. If they know that your first reaction is going to be care for them, as opposed to focus on their behavior, because then it's like you're giving them an opportunity in an environment to thrive, because they know they're loved above all else,
and they're safe, right? Exactly. And that's what culture does, is build a safe place. And you're known, and you have the ability to work. I think one of the pictures, I think one of the things, Louis wrote a book called Don't Give an Enemy a Seat at the Table. But the whole picture is, Jesus setting the table for the people. And I think of the Last Supper, I think of him doing those things, filling their cups because he was about to be emptied. But it's the same way as a leader. You got to empty yourself. But if you don't have anything to empty, then you're running on empty, and you better start building within you those qualities, because if not, your culture is going to suffer. So yeah, man, that was probably one of my favorite chapters I've read in a long time. Chapter 4. So
I'd love to know what that coach's personal life looked like. Like, what did he do for himself that caused him to be that kind of person? And they may say more about it on there. I just can't remember. I mean, I read it pretty quick. But he is a different kind of coach. I mean, he's one of the best, obviously one of the best in the NBA. I know Phil Jackson, Pat Riley, there's people that we know that are way up there. But this is more than talent. He cares for his team. So that was chapter 2, 3, and 4. Next week, we're going to do 5 and 6, and we'll wrap up that first section of safety. So if you're going to build a good culture, you got to have safety. But here's a few questions that I want us to ask ourselves this week. Number 1, do my people feel safe where they work? Safe as in stability, and know what I'm thinking and the vision of where I'm headed. So if you're the boss, if you're the person in charge, do they know the vision and where they're headed? Because if not, then they're probably asking questions all the time. They're wondering if they're safe. They're wondering if they even belong there. So do your people feel safe at work? Number 2, do my people know why I need them? Do your people even know that you need them? I mean, 1, they show up to work, but do they actually know from a transparent version of yourself that you need them? Number 3, am I pouring into my team? I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, is, are you meeting them halfway on the bridge? Are you walking halfway to them? And if you have nothing to pour into your team, I would ask you to consider just reading books, podcasts, listening. I mean, you can reach out to me. We can sit down and talk. But I think one of the biggest things that I was asked this week was, hey, what should I put on my reading list by one of my friends? And I told him, hey, because he asked me for 5 books on leadership and development, and then he asked me for 3 church-related books. And I
I think I gave them 8 personal development books, and I said, if I'm growing as a leader, then those other, the church, quote unquote, books shouldn't matter because I'm growing. And that's where God wants me. God wants me growing continually. But if we have to separate church and leadership books, and I go, but to me it's the same, because I'm developing myself to pursue God in a different way. But pursuing God to me personally is using the best that I have, and learning the best that I have is through these leadership and personal development books. So yeah, anyways, I think that we need to be pouring in ourselves so that we can pour in our teams. So yeah, anything else?
No, totally agree.
This past week we had a live with Stephanie Cranky. It's on our Instagram because Facebook was being stupid, or really it was me not preparing enough. I didn't know how to do a live with someone else on there, and it just failed. And Tiana's usually the one that sets it up. So shout out to her. Hope she's feeling better. Man, tomorrow's May 1st. Got one more month of school left for kids. But guys, that's another month down. We got to stop saying that we're going to start tomorrow. And you don't have to. You do not have to. But today I posted something on my Instagram that a buddy of mine, I barely know the guy, but I see him at least once every few weeks. I just put on there that discipline doesn't care about the day. And he just said, hey, that's one of my shortcomings. I said, hey, mine too. Several things that I'm not disciplined in, but we can get better every single day. It's a new start, right? So May 1st, don't let another month pass you by. Yeah, because we're learning this morning on one of the lessons we heard.
Dash.
Yeah, your dash on your tombstone. And it's described as a blip on the radar. Your life's a blip on the radar, so what are you going to do with it? Yeah, I think just let's get after it. If you don't mind, if you guys don't have y'all never followed the YouTube, if you don't mind, would you guys go on YouTube, look up Made for More Consulting, and just at least hit subscribe. We don't spam, we don't send any notifications out. Just subscribe, because we need about, I think, 8 more to at least get to where we can do lives on there. They base theirs off of subscribers, and we're almost there. And as we were talking, I think we are only, it went up since we started this podcast. So this will be our 2nd all-time highest month.
Nice.
Yeah, we are about 14 away from the highest month, 15 away from the highest month. But we want to appreciate you guys listening, sharing this podcast. And remember, we exist for more. We're here to offer more. Don't ever give up. Every single one of us is made for more. Later. All right, YouTube. Hope you guys have a great Sunday. Thanks for watching. Jamie.
See you later.